Hi, welcome to my show. Today's guest is Barb Rebbeck. And Barb is someone that I met through the Detroit Working Writers. And over time, I've got to know more about her through our conference and through Twitter. Welcome, Barb.
Thank you.
Barb is a teacher and an author. And I'm very happy to have her here because she does a lot of good for the community that she is involved with and where she teaches. I'd like for you to share that with us, like what do you do, where you teach, and some of the projects that you're currently working on.
Okay. As a published author, I went back to schools because I had taught for 45 years or something like that, and then retired. And that's when I seriously started to write. But what happened was a teacher that I knew who teaches at Beverly Hills Academy asked me if I would come into her classroom. And she had the 8th graders read my book, Nola Gals. And then the first year I just worked with 8th grade, but then it expanded every year. So by the end of the 5 years, I was working with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And we produced an anthology every year. And
So I would like you, if you can hold this up a little bit, like
Sure.
Nola Gals. Can you tell us a little bit what is that about? And also, the title is interesting. So what is that?
Okay, the NOLA, you see the fleur-de-lis here,
Yes.
stands for New Orleans, Louisiana.
Okay.
So Nola Gals is a story of 2 teens. They're both 14 years old. One is an African-American from New Orleans, and the other is Caucasian, and she is from Houston, Texas. And when Hurricane Katrina hits, Essence from New Orleans is bused to Houston in the middle of the night. It's very traumatic. And so the 2 girls meet, and together they try to survive the aftermath of the hurricane. And what comes into play is Grace, who is the Houston girl, is reading To Kill a Mockingbird for summer reading. Mm-hmm. And that plays more and more into the story. You see a parallel between what happened in To Kill a Mockingbird and what's happening now to the people from New Orleans.
Can you tell me how did this idea come about?
Well, I was teaching at the time, and I thought these kids really need to know, and future kids need to know what happened with Hurricane Katrina, what a catastrophe it was with the government, and how these people were treated. So I wrote the book.
And because of the nature of it, it doesn't take place in this, because it's kind of like a true event. I mean, the Hurricane Katrina is true. Yeah. Did you have to do a lot of research for this?
Yes. When I work with kids in school, I show them I have a whole notebook. I like to do research by hand. So I have 2 crates of books and videos that I show them, and then the whole notebook. Because one of the things I do is I describe Hurricane Katrina in an extended metaphor. I compare it to a teenage girl. So the hurricane becomes another one of the Nola Gals. And that's what really intrigues kids. So when I work with them, I teach them how to write an extended metaphor. So they usually write poems about themselves, how they see themselves compared to something.
And the age group of the students that you work with?
With the Nola Gals, mostly 8th grade. When I taught middle school and high school. My degrees are in English and French. But I taught very little French, actually, and I have a master's degree in it. I ended up teaching mostly writing. So.
Well, I took 4 years of French. And I think Comment allez-vous? That's, I think.
Comment allez-vous.
Comment allez-vous. I can't. That we and no. Comment allez-vous. 4 years. And I got all A's, right? But like my teacher said, she's like, you guys are not really going to learn this unless you go and live in France for a year.
True.
So,
you need the immersion.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I have really these awesome pictures of you teaching. Now, can you tell us like what they're doing here?
This is a group, I think they look like 7th graders, maybe the 8th graders, I don't know.
Okay.
Because I worked with them for 3 years, so I knew them. And let's see, what we're doing is, I think they're doing pre-writing activities here. I get a lot of discussion going. Of course, the great thing about the school is the class size. I mean, this is the class.
Well, I was going to ask you, is this because they're selecting this, or is it just that's the class size? That's the class size. Amazing.
The first year I worked there were 3 kids in the 8th grade.
Wow.
The first group that read Nola Gals.
Oops, sorry. Let me get this.
These are kids out in the
that's
hall
cute.
reading my book. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Now this was the anthology that we did that followed the hero's journey. This is, you can see what they're doing. It's a little signing party. These are the sixth graders
awesome.
sixth graders took charge of this anthology that year. There they are. And I had a cake made at Kroger's that had the cover of the anthology on it. So,
Nice. What year was this?
this was a couple years ago.
And how long did it take you to do this anthology?
We started in, usually we have to come up with a theme, started in October, and then it's published in April.
So you do this every year?
I did it for 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Okay, this is, I wrote a play version of Nola Gals called Turbulence, and this is the first reading of it. They've got the scripts in their hands, and I'm sitting over there because I'm taking notes for corrections for the script, but they're actually reading the characters.
And this is the book,
Yeah.
Nola Gals. Now, with what you just said, you wrote a script for this. What are you planning to do with that? Are you planning to do it into a play?
It is a play.
It is already a play. Okay.
And I've had groups tell me, like schools, they'll put the play on, and they always back out. Fowlerville Community Theater was interested in it for a while. They backed out.
Is it like costly, maybe a lot of work?
Well, I wrote the play so that there are no adults on stage. Because one of the things I hate about when you go see a middle school play, you get a 12-year-old with a beard, and I don't like that. So the adults appear, but they appear in big photos behind.
Okay.
So it's all the kids telling the story of the hurricane. I would love to get it produced somewhere.
Okay.
I tried Stagecrafters in Royal Oak.
Yeah.
I sent them the book. I sent them the play. They lost it all. So I gave up on them.
Yeah. Welcome to the entertainment business.
Yeah.
Well, and I can't get this. So, you said that you can read something from the anthology.
Okay.
That would be great.
This is. Can you see it? Oh, it looks like this is.
It's now on me when it was supposed to be. Okay.
There. Okay. This is original artwork by one of the students.
Okay.
Because I don't like when kids just pull things off the internet. I want them to use their talents. All right.
You really make them work, don't you? You're a real
Yes.
teacher.
One student said to me once, he said, from the time we walk in the room of this classroom, we know the expectations are high. I said, very good.
Good for you. It should be like
Yeah.
that. I
Okay.
came from a very strict school system, and I think because of it, I did learn quite a bit and use my skills and talents rather than cheat.
That was one thing they used to say about my class. We can't cheat in here because you don't give
You're
true
a
and
good
false
teacher.
tests. We can't cheat. Anyway, we used the theme that year of the hero's journey.
Okay.
So they read a book called The Gauntlet, which was a middle school book by Karuna Riazzi, I think her name is. And then the sixth graders then wrote their own hero's journey tale.
Okay.
That was a lot of fun. That's in here. And then what they wanted to do is look at their family heroes. So the sixth graders again wrote poems about these family heroes.
Before you read that, can you just, I can't put the camera on there, but you can actually do what you, we can actually just put it up for a second just to see what, I really like this. So you have the poetry, so you have the poem, or some of them are essays? Or was it all poems?
The seventh graders wrote memoir pieces.
Okay. So the material, the text is there, but then they have the picture of the person that they wrote about.
Right.
Is that how it goes? Yeah. And so I like this one right here. I believe this is
And
the grandfather.
some of them had to go home and, we got the whole family involved because they had to find the photos.
Yeah.
Because some of them are
so it was an
deceased.
experience.
So I'll read you one. This was by
Sure.
Sally Atassi.
Okay.
Okay. I was watching the news on Al Jazeera. War in Syria raged. Everyone was in fear. My family gathered around the TV, falling to the ground in tears. Tribulation, tragedy, trying to make sense of it, like putting a puzzle together. Later, we hear my uncle had passed. He lay across the patient, trying to save him in the Syrian Red Cross ambulance. It was unimaginable. My favorite uncle is gone because of Assad. Later, my family and friends demonstrated against Assad in memory of my uncle at the mall. They handed out first aid kits made by the Red Cross with his picture placed on them. Tears flowed, both happy and sad, because he was our family hero.
Wow. Well, is this now when I'm looking at the images and the stories that are shared, is everybody in the school mostly of Middle Eastern background or of Arab background? They are. Interesting. See, it's really amazing sometimes how little we know about the communities that we live in. Like until you told me, because I was saying how Beverly Hills Academy
Right.
wouldn't seem.
Well, the first first thing I have to say, no, it's not in California. And then we go to...
That's another thing, right?
Yeah.
That part it took me a while to even know that, not about the school, but just in general, that there was a Beverly Hills city here. But then to top it off, this school is strictly for, is it Arab Americans?
It's called Beverly Hills Academy, and it's an Islamic Montessori school.
So I was telling you that the whole, the names, and it really just shows how really names don't matter, and they can even throw you off. But what I like is that you're giving an opportunity. One of the things for myself as an immigrant, and coming from a war-torn country, a lot of our traumas, creativity, we need creativity to help heal them. And we do come from regions really where creativity is not even nurtured or nourished or encouraged. And so for these students for you to give them this opportunity, it's a lot of healing work, and I don't know if you're aware. I'm sure you're aware of that, but you told me about this project, but this is the first time I kind of see it or listen to you reading it. How do you feel when you do this, or when the students read it, or what is the feedback that you've gotten about it?
Well, the kids love they learn the skills of writing. I mean, these are good poems when you see them. So they're, it's different layers. Just like in my book, when I brought in the To Kill a Mockingbird, I could physically feel the deepening of the story. So that's what happens in the classroom. There's a depth that you reach.
A depth, yes. And so have you thought of expanding on some of these projects, what do you want to do in the future, given what you've done so far? And even with your book, do you feel like there's something else? I know that you said that you worked on the play and you're trying to do that, but is there another project that you're working on for the future?
Actually, I've switched to I'm working on an adult book now, a suspense, I guess you call it psychological thriller or something, which is really up here compared to the depth of this stuff. But the book has been in other schools too. I've worked in Hazel Park Public Schools and Waterford Public Schools, and then Academy of the Sacred Heart, which actually is in the book. when the boys at Sacred Heart read it, they have split middle school boys and girls, and I would go in and they'd say, "We know this book takes place in Sacred Heart," and I'd say, "Well, how would you know that?" And they said, "Because look, if you look out our window, you can see the art room, the girls' art room, and we look out the window, and that's in the book." I'd say, "Well, what a coincidence."
Well, that's good that they've paid attention. That means they read the book. Really,
right.
They didn't just flip through the pages.
Yeah. So actually, in terms of, I'm going back to Beverly Hills just in March, just to work with the 8th graders. And the teacher that I've worked with, Sarah Coyle, she keeps sending me emails. "Are you sure you can't share your expertise more than you are now?" But I've just taken the time off to pull back and do my own writing with the other novel. But I will be back in the spring, and I think what they're going to do is we'll have an author day where they ask me questions about the book, and then I'm going to have them read the play too, because the other group, I have a scrapbook that Sarah Coyle, the teacher, did for me, and there's pages of kids saying thank you and stuff, and several of them said, "We loved reading the play. It was so much fun." So I'll probably do that. And they don't have the facility to produce the play, so that's what I would love to do, is get the play produced somewhere.
And you said, when did you start writing the book? You said that you were already teaching long before you even...
It's a family joke how many times I've retired. So I left. I taught in public schools. Then I was a consultant at Oakland schools. So I was the writing consultant for 37 districts in Oakland County. And I also ran their summer writing project for teachers, the Oakland Writing Project. So I was writing more professional articles and some poetry. And then I had a male friend in my life who left, and he went traveling in Japan or something. And as he left, he said to me, "You're losing your muse. You're not going to write again," which
that was the trigger.
Yeah, right. That's when the first novel came.
Oh, you need to thank him for that, right?
Yeah. So. Actually, though, I wrote Nola Gals after I had retired from Sacred Heart, because I left public schools and then I was a consultant, and then when I was retired, I went to Sacred Heart. And that was trying for me because I no longer could put up with any of the educational nonsense. So my mantra was, I have a pension. I don't have to be here. So I stayed there 1 year in the girls' school. Then I left. Then I came back and did one class in the boys' school. Then I left again and came back and did a full load with the boys again. But then I finally left it. And that's when I seriously wrote Nola Gals.
And so, you know that I'm associated with so much of the writing with authors, and like I'm ambassador for the Authors Guild of America. So I work a lot with writers, and sometimes they feel like they're either too old or it's too late or it's this or it's that or whatever it may be. What would be like some words of encouragement that you would give somebody who, whatever age they're in, or maybe if they do feel like it's kind of like, well, they put so many years into other things, maybe they're tired. What advice would you give people that are just trying to get their first book out and later in life?
It takes a tremendous amount of persistence. You really have to keep at it. It took me 5 years to find a publisher for this.
Wow.
After I wrote it,
And how long did it take you to write it?
Probably altogether 2 years.
That's a big process.
Mm-hmm. What happened, I had started, I'm a pantser. I don't plan. I don't outline anything. Mm-hmm. So, if you look at, I have my research notebooks, but that's handwritten, and I have things on Post-its all over the place, and so I actually had started, I had all the research done, and I was at the point of starting to write it when my older sister was killed in a car accident, and that kind of took me off it. But I had planned, I went on a cruise 3 weeks after her death, and I actually sat on the deck of that with a, what did I have? It was a drink anyway. I can't remember what it was. It didn't have an umbrella in it. But I sat, it was the pool deck, but I wasn't by the pool. I was in the shadows, and that's when I wrote the extended metaphor. So that started the whole writing process. It was in terms of grief, getting that out and being surrounded by the ocean, and that metaphor just came to me of Katrina as a teen girl. So from then, it was pretty fast to write it.
Interesting. This reminds me of when I had a hard time writing my story, The Great American Family, which you came the other day to see the premiere. Thank you very much, with Cynthia. I remember when I was having difficulty writing that book because I was trying to get the material together, and I'm now like, well, I already wrote 2 books. Why am I having a hard time with this? Although my previous books were novels, but there was a lot of them were like based on true experiences or true events. But I was really having a hard time writing that, and so that's when I connected with my teacher, Lindsay Andrews. She's like a best-selling author of the Medicine Women series. And I remember something that she said, which is so true. She said, there's a time and place for every story. And, and that was 10 years ago. Well, I called her but almost 9 years ago. But the whole process between me trying to write it, between it getting published, between all the other things that happened, and it's now getting being viewed and recognized, because now is the time for it. Mm-hmm. So even the writing process has the time for it, and so that sometimes that's what it takes. It's born in our minds, and then it just kind of comes. And then it does need the discipline as well, but there's something once you put your intent out there, and it just kind of comes along in the right timing. I'm curious about you switching the genre, that went from this kind of story to a thriller. I'm curious about that because there's different reasons why we do things. I've changed quite a bit of genres and went from different. What is your story behind that?
Actually, the new book is called The Girl from the USO.
Okay.
And it's my parents' story of how they met. I told you my dad was in the RAF. Yeah. He came over here in 1943 for training. A lot of people don't know that the British trained their pilots over here to avoid the bombing going on in England.
Okay.
So he came over here in March of 1943. My mother was a USO girl. Roosevelt had just started the USO, which stands for United Service Organizations. So on the Ides of March, she went to a dance at the USO base, and they met. and then they were married 6 months later. So the beginning of the book is their story, how they met. And it was really fun because I got to do all the history of Detroit in 1941.
Mm-hmm.
She had told me that their first date, they heard Evelyn and her magic violins. It was an all-female orchestra. So that was a lot of fun writing that.
So how come it was it didn't become a memoir?
It could have, but I was very intrigued. I was reading a lot of psychological thrillers then, and I thought I could turn this into this. So that's what I did, but it changed totally. Originally, I was going to have him be a killer.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and my family was kind of, "You're going to have Dad be a killer?" I said, "Well, he's gone." But I don't know if this happens to you when you write, but the characters take over and they change things. People don't realize how that works. And she has a series of dreams, nightmares really, in this book. And in one of them, he stood right out. He's walking on the beach, and he starts talking about the angst he has from being in the war. Mm-hmm. So that changed the whole thing right there. I then saw him as damaged, and that was going to be responsible for a lot of his actions with the relationship with her. So it was intriguing.
When do you think you're going to have that book available?
I finished it last year, and I'm looking for an agent or publisher right now. Mm-hmm. I thought of self-publishing, but I listened to you, and I went to the conference that Rochester did all about self.
Oh, yes.
That terrified me. I thought,
it's a lot of work.
I know.
And in my case, I started my company, in 2004. So I've been... my company is established in that for a while, and it is intimidating for some people starting out, especially in your case where you did go in a different, you did have a publisher that was doing everything, and then you would have to kind of like try to figure all that out. But with your book, what I like about Nola Gals is that you can continue with this like forever, with it being in schools and I mean, how did you even get it in schools? Is it because you're a teacher, or because I've talked with a lot of authors, like I said, and some of them feel actually I'll be honest, even myself, the principal of my kids' school, we talked about this because the teacher, one of the teachers from my kids' school came to one of my signings and just to tell me about this, how there was a lack with Arab American, Chaldean American stories, that they could find them for other ethnicities, for African Americans, for the Hispanics, other communities, the Polish. But she said that there was a lack in this area. And then I said, okay, but I felt like how you're saying now with regards to the self-publishing, is like, okay, what do you do with that? And the principal even said, if you can, because I feel like my characters are not in a certain age place. They're a little bit older, but my daughter and my nieces have read it. They're teenagers, preteens, and they're like, Mom, we really love this. So if somebody wants to get into the educational part of it, if their story matches and has that influence, how do they take it to that level? I mean, you might not even, I'm just curious if there's something that you could share.
Well, I came out of having been a consultant in Oakland County. So when it was published, I had teachers in Waterford. One of the best teachers I've ever worked with, Sandra Riccardi, who started doing it as a read aloud with as young as 6th grade kids. So I went in and worked with her class. And then I started working at the other middle school in Waterford with it because they adopted the book. So what my deal was, if the school adopts the book and buys it, I'll come in free of charge. So I didn't get paid. I've never been paid at Beverly Hills, because it's more like a volunteer. Are you talking about all the stuff that you just said? You don't get paid for that? No, because I know that schools don't have the money to pay for it. I've said to people, they'll say,
but do they buy the kid? They buy the books, and then you provide your free time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've had teachers say to me, or principals say, "Are you sure you don't want money for this?" And I say, "Do you have money?" No. So it's like a payback after I retired that I do this.
And see, this is what people have to also understand in the writing industry. It's not just a matter, I have this, that most of us, especially depending on the message that we're trying, and if it's not just money associated, if we really believe in our messages and like even with my film, I mean, I invested the finishing funds for it, and there was so much that that's why it took 8 years, but because I really believed in the message. And so you're a great example of what you just said. It's like, here you are putting all this effort and this, but you know that the message is important, and plus the service that you're providing for the kids is wonderful. It's amazing.
it's an opportunity they won't have. You know, the opportunity to work with a writer is different from
Right.
working with a teacher usually.
Yeah,
because
and that's
very
it's a
few
lot
of
of
them
work.
are
It's not
writers.
just you've invested a lot.
Yeah.
Well, we only have a few minutes left, and I really enjoyed this. I just like that when people invest that much into providing some kind of a service, and like you said, it's for some it's like a service or opportunity they wouldn't have had otherwise. Do you have just any last words that you want to share, especially for writers, whether they're established or not, just for the writing life, something about the writing life that you can share from your wisdom and your experience?
I just came from a critique group. There were 5 of us, and one of the things we talked about, how do you approach revision? You know, and all 5 of us have totally different styles. So I think one of the things that's happened in school when they did the whole writing process movement was it became an orthodoxy. You have to go through these steps. And I never did that with kids. I wanted them to discover what worked best for them. And I think that's what writers have to do. You know, don't so much listen to gurus, you know.
Excellent advice.
Yeah, just do your own thing, whatever it takes to get it down on paper.
Yeah.
And once it's down on paper, then you go into the whole wonderful world of revision, you know, which is where you learn. You know,
I love that advice. Yes, a lot of them don't tap into their own intuition, into their own creativity, and they get stuck listening on the how-to.
Yeah.
And they can't get out of that trap a little bit. But once we surrender to it, and then, like you said, we go back and revise. And there's a lot of communities available for us that we can have writers groups, critique groups. There's even online. There's a lot of resources for us to have. So I want to thank you for coming here today and sharing the story. And hopefully the next book that you'll publish, you'll come back and tell us all about that, right?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me.